So welcome everyone. Welcome to this meetup. Welcome to Flock. And today we want to talk a little bit about testing. And we have two speakers today, Vincent de Bruin and Johan Veenstra. And they will be talking about how they migrated away from one testing tool, Protractor, to something new. And they considered 4 different testing frameworks in their migration from one to another. And they did it at NS International, so the Dutch railways, but then the international version of that.
Yep.
So there's actually a difference between the Dutch railways and Dutch railways international, or NSI. Maybe they will talk a little bit about that, but mainly it will be indeed about how they test their software and how they migrated away from one testing tool to another. So you're very welcome, Vincent and Johan, and please take it away.
Yes, thank you very much for the introduction, Jara. I really like it if people turn on the cameras, so I also get some feedback. And we'll start off with a small introduction. I'm Johan Veenstra. I'm a test engineer at NS International for over 2.5 years now, almost 2.5 years. And I'm representing together with Vincent de Bruin. We're working together also at International. Vincent, could you introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, hello, my name is Vincent de Bruin. I've been working for a little over 4 years at Flock now as a software engineer. And most of the time was at NS International, as 3 years actually, helping with all sorts of test automation problems. So yeah, as a test engineer.
Yes, we'll start with a small introduction of the case and also the environment we work in. Then I will tell you something about the test tools and also our evaluation of the tools. And then we'll start, we have the most interesting part, the demo from Vincent. A live demo.
Right.
Yeah. And we'll wrap up with a nice conclusion. But before we start, I'm wondering for whom of you programming is part of the daily job. So I think with you can... with Control-Alt-H, yes, hands up.
There's a hand icon, raise hand at the bottom. Yeah.
Yeah, I think quite a few. And who never programs or doesn't have any programming experience? Hands up. No one? All right, that's good. Good. There will also be some code. But don't run away if you don't have a lot of experience programming. You will also be able to follow it. So where does it all happen? Well, before Corona, we're working at Amsterdam Central Station. NS International is not in the headquarters in Utrecht, but we're actually working here in the attic on the right. I don't know, do you see my mouse?
Yeah, we do.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. So we're working in the attic, so on top, and sometimes we also have meetings over here on the left side. Then you have a very nice view over Damrak all the way to the Dam. Sometimes I get a little bit distracted there, but when we're not distracted by all the people and admiring the beautiful building, we try to build a booking tool. We're building a book tool in Angular, where we sell international train tickets. Lately, the intercity to Brussels has been very popular, to Brussels and Antwerp, as you might have read in the news. And last year we were testing the application with Protractor. We use a so-called monorepo, so all our applications and libraries are in one repository, and we have over 11 different apps and libraries with Protractor tests. We're working on it together with 3 front-end teams, and each front-end team has one test engineer. And then last year, in April 2021, it was announced that Protractor was deprecated by the end of 2022. So there would be no more support, and Protractor will get a nice place on the Google graveyard. But for us, it meant that we had to change tool. And this is the architecture. I think this is quite a common architecture. You have the test. We had the test with Cucumber and the glue code. We use page objects, and they returned element finders, Protractor element finders, and we had the browser on which we navigated and also got the current URL, for example, to validate the current URL. So this is what we had. And if we wanted to change to a new tool, we had to rewrite everything in this box. So actually, we would have to rewrite everything. And that's something we didn't want. We had seen it previously also in other teams and other parts, that you're working on something for 2 years and then a new tool appears, or there's change of personnel, and you start rebuilding your whole test set again all over. But yeah, we spend a lot of time on these test cases. We come together with the business analyst, developer, and tester, and we discuss our scenarios. So yeah, we really wanted to keep our test cases. Unfortunately, we aren't the first one with this problem. The dependency inversion and the solid principles offers a very nice solution. You can decouple tools from the test cases. So in the interface, you describe what you can do, and then in the implementation, it's the how. So how the tool does it. And then when you change tool, you just have to write a new implementation. You can also see that, for example, in solar systems. I just bought the solar panels, so that's why I'm using this as an example. But in solar systems, you have the solar panels. They have a lifespan of about 20 to 30 years. And you have the transformers. They have a lifespan of about 8 years. And when you couple them tightly, you have to replace everything when the transformer breaks down. And that's way more expensive than when you decouple it. So when the transformer breaks down, you can just replace the transformer and keep your solar panels. So in this case, the test cases. So the first thing we actually did was refactor the test set to this architecture. But then, of course, we still had to choose the tool. So we came up with a shortlist with the most used TypeScript test tools. And I'm curious about your experience. So please, again, the hands up in the chat. Who has experience with Webdriver IO? Yeah, a few. And Cypress? Also a few. And then Playwright? Oh, almost no one. Yep, just hovered. And Test Cafe? Also two. Yeah, it also, I think, represents the communities quite well. Yeah, we did a tool evaluation based on the documentation and also the architecture. And we have a quick look at the architecture of the different tools. The architecture determines a lot of functionality that the test tool can support. You can automate behavior from inside or outside the browser. So I mean, what I mean with in and outside the browser is where the code is executed. So you can, when the code is executed inside the browser, multi-tabbing, mouse navigation, native mouse events, and keyboard events, for example, they cannot be automated like drag and drops and hoovers. And also cross-browser testing is harder to support. And so when you're controlling the browser from outside the browser, you can support all this functionality, so you actually get more functionality. And another thing that's really important is the protocol implemented. You have the W3C protocol and the DevTools protocol. W3C is a web standard, which triggers the same event as a user would. And then you have the DevTools protocol, the same as in your in the browser. If you press F12, you'll get a nice developers console with the network traffic and the console. And that's what you get when you implement the DevTools protocol. So you get more functionality. And Selenium controls the browser from outside. So you have the cross-browser support and multi-tabbing, but it doesn't implement the DevTools protocol. Not yet, they're working on it. So you don't get the network interceptor, for example. Now we have Test Cafe, which actually started also inside the browser. But then they introduced a proxy, Hammerhead, so that it could support cross-browser testing. But as it is running in a proxy, they don't support multi-tabbing. Right? They have Playwright. Playwright is doing both, so controlling the browser from outside and implementing the DevTools protocol. So that's why you get the most functionality when using Playwright. And last, there's Cypress. Cypress implements the DevTools protocol, so you get the network interceptor, but it's running inside the browser, so it doesn't support multi-tabbing, native mouse events, and keyboard events. So you might wonder why this architecture. Well, it's so you get access to the application context, and also they claim to be faster, but as you will see in a demo, we didn't have this same experience. And together with the 3 teams, we came up with a short list with all the items we thought important for the new tool. And we studied the documentation, did a few POCs, and then we gave weighted scores. And I already went over the functionality. But as you can see, Playwright and Webdriver IO are both entirely free. If you're using Cypress for the test dashboard, you will have to pay. And Test Cafe has a studio for which you have to pay a license. The easiness of use is subjective, but we also took into account how easily the tool would fit in our architecture. And then the documentation, you can see that Cypress and Webdriver IO have a big community. There's a lot of information on Stack Overflow. Playwright is still new, so there's a little bit less information on Stack Overflow, but the documentation is actually quite good. So now the fun part. Demo time.
Yes. So this demo, I'm going to showcase the 4 tools, and at the end also show how we managed to make them all work together in one application. So first of all, I'm going to show you the scenario that we're going to test, fake test. This is the NS International website, or the booking tool, as Jon already said. And the scenario we're going to test is if we go from Amsterdam to Paris. And I click the reverse button, then we see that the origin and destination have switched around. And how does this work on code? Close this. At NS International, we use feature files, this Cucumber, specification by example, and this captures the scenario I just did. So given the user on the homepage, the booking tool, the user has entered origin, and destination, which are Amsterdam and Paris. When the user selects the option to reverse the journey, then the origin has become the destination, and the destination is now the origin. So that's what we're going to test. This is implemented by using something called step files, or glue code, as we call it. This is given when then implementations. So for example, we have a given of a sentence, users on the homepage, the booking tool, and this actually matches this first sentence. So that's how it's implemented. And the first implementation you see is of Cypress. So I'm going to go a little bit to the syntax of each tool and showcase a little bit of the things we encountered, a little bit of the nice things, and a little bit of the maybe not so nice things. And some of them is subjective. It's sometimes our opinion, but this is what we encountered when we first implemented these tools. So for instance, in Cypress, you have visit to go to a URL. So at the start of our tests, we actually go to a site to connect the front end to a WireMock backend, not an actual backend for the person to test. And with get in Cypress, you can obtain a element of the page and first click on it, and this will click on the cookie model. So We have a way to enter data into a field using type. And we have a way of matching expectations. For instance, in this way, we check that this element before this has the text equal to whatever the origin is, and the same for destination. So quite simple. Here in there's one peculiar thing about Cypress, and that it wants its files to be at a very specific place. You can overwrite that, as we did here, but the other tools, they don't have that. But yeah, and we'll see later on that this is also one of the reasons that Cypress might not also play that well with the other tools. But yeah, this is one of the peculiar things of Cypress, that it has many defaults, and if you want to do something out of the box, something different, it takes a bit more work. Now I'm going to run a test. Yeah, let's see if this works. So it takes a little bit of time to for Cypress to set up things, but what's very nice about Cypress is this integrated testing environment, debugger, you could call it. We often refer to it as the debugger. And as this will take very long, I don't have enough text to talk continuously through this, but okay, luckily the test is already starting. And yeah, normally these tests are not this slow. It's really because I'm presenting, and so this time above here is not very representative, but I can tell you at least that during the local testing I did, it was about 8 to 10 seconds. It's one of the slower ones. And you might think it's because of this debugger. This debugger is really cool. You can actually go back and see how a step is implemented. You can see what happens on the screen before and after. You see it flicker between left and right, before and after what happens during the step. So that's actually a really cool feature about Cypress. So I also wanted to show you how fast it was without, but I think I'll skip that. It seems my laptop is handling quite well, so I am turning on my camera again. Okay. So let's go to the next tool, which is Playwright. Again, same feature file. Oh, close this. Same feature file, that's for all the tools, so I will not show that again. And here's the step implementation, but then for Playwright. So immediately you already see some differences. First of all, we have to start our own browser instance. This was not the case for Cypress. And from the browser instance, we get a context, and the page's object is what we do everything on. So compared to Cypress, you already see some syntactical differences. We have go to instead of visit. We can immediately click on a selector, which is just a string, instead of getting it first. Actually, Playwright was also way too fast in typing, so we actually had to delay it a little bit. Otherwise, the test would not work, it would be flaky. And one more thing in our expectations, actually we use a tool here called Chai, which is our personal choice. So this is not in Playwright itself. You could do it differently or use a different tool, but for this purpose, we use Chai to test our expectations. I am going to run this test now. I am very confidently that this will not cause any problems. And curious to see how fast it will be. And as you can see here, the steps, it's actually quite fast. Without the presenting, this was 2.5 seconds for executing the steps, and it's 12 seconds for the entire setup. It was like 7 seconds, I believe, if I remember correctly, if my laptop's not doing anything else. it's actually quite fast, and especially in executing steps, it's very fast, which is one of the nice things about Playwright. Then we go to the next tool, which is Test Cafe. Yeah, immediately you can already see that Test Cafe requires a little bit more boilerplate than the other tools. And it's just part because Test Cafe, at least I believe it can be run without, but we couldn't get it working without. You need a proxy server, and this proxy server actually gathers some results from the tests. And for instance, decides where to put screenshots and stuff like that. When I run the test, you'll see exactly how that functions. Well, a little bit about the syntax is also that it requires this selector from Test Cafe. And let's see an example where this is used. So where the other tools, they had a very simple way of getting selectors. Here it's a bit more difficult. You have a selector and then you have to also give it a context. Again, not sure why it is like this, but it's a bit more verbose. And I'm sure that the Test Cafe experts will probably see that it can be done much cleaner, much faster. But this is what we came up with. So before I run the test, so it will first connect to a proxy server. And one other cool feature of Test Cafe is that you can actually follow the mouse. So I'm saying this now, so you can look for it. I will now run the script and tell you where to look. And I hope that my laptop doesn't crash while doing this. And I hope everybody can still hear me quite well and see me quite well and see my screen quite well. If there are any problems, then let me know. Maybe during the starting of these tests that I will flicker a little bit. I'm not sure. Oh, I'm sorry. I think I will not be able to show you the Test Cafe one. It doesn't execute it within the maximum allotted time, unfortunately, of 20 seconds. I'll try it one more time. Otherwise, perhaps we can show it after the presentation if this doesn't work. In any case, for now, I'll just describe what happens. It will first connect to a proxy server, and then when it runs a test, you can actually see a big arrow on the screen, and it actually follows all the elements where you seem to work. Fortunately, we couldn't see the screen, but at least we have the results. You see that it works. It's steps execution is quite fast in Test Cafe, but the setup is quite slow because it's trying to connect to this proxy server. So that's the result. Unfortunately, we couldn't follow the arrow on the screen, but you have to trust me that it's a very cool feature of Test Cafe. So then we have our last test tool, which is Webdriver IO. I'll turn on my camera again. Webdriver IO is the only Selenium application of the four. There are some red things here in this file. Don't worry, it's just TypeScript being outdated. Apart from that, it is a very minimal syntax. The $sign to get the elements, and apart from that, well, nothing shocking. Click and set values. The only thing is because, it is a Selenium thing. You have to wait before every action you do. So before the clicks, we actually have to wait for the element to be clickable. And the other tools, they actually incorporate that already in the framework. That doesn't mean that those tools don't require waiters at some points in some things, but with the Selenium implementation, you really have to wait for everything. It's only that this is the third step in the scenario. If we would have visited the page and then did this, then it would fail. You would have to wait for this element to actually be visible and then get the text out of it, etc. So that's a little bit of the negative thing about Selenium implementations. I think most people who work with Selenium know how that works. Imagine migrating from one of these tools to another. especially if you have thousands of scenarios and you have hundreds of step files, and you have multiple teams in a mono repo working on this and trying to migrate it at once. It's not possible. So Johan actually came up with a clever solution. I'm not even claiming your idea, Johan. Is to put all the tool-specific elements, tool-specific actions behind an interface. So we have the same architecture you saw Johan show before, the test with the page objects, but now they communicate with an interface of our own design, and they never know any of the specific tool implementations. And the handy thing about this is that we can just easily switch from one tool to another without having to update all these hundreds of step files. So I can show you a small example of how that works. Of course, the actual implementation is much larger, much more complicated, but here we have all the 4 tools next to each other. And unfortunately, I can't run this application because Cypress and Playwright, they don't play well together. Actually, if you remove Cypress, then Playwright, Cafe, and Webdriver IO, they could easily work next to each other. And let's see how this step file looks now. Yeah, we have it right in front of me. So as you can see, there's no tool-specific imports in our step files anymore. Everything is done via page objects. For instance, this home page object, and via the browser interface. And I will go to this home page object now. Oh no, I will first show you this. Yeah, so from the page objects, we derive the way of getting the values and clicking on the buttons, etc. Let's go to the page object. That's probably more interesting. Again, no tool-specific imports. We also in our page objects we don't have those. One thing. So PO stands for page object, and CO stands for component object, because the station select is actually not a page, so we call that component object. And that's why we also have the way of getting our web elements is get web element CO, so it means web element component object. And I'll show you how that works. And here's where the bit of the magic happens. So this can return whatever web element of whatever tool we require at this point. So you could switch it per application, you could switch it in your pipeline, or maybe for locally for testing, and easily switch between the tools and see if it works. And all these web elements are again still our design. They all implement our own interface. And for the purposes of this simple application, we only need 3 methods: click, the get text, and the sending of some input to an element. And as you can see, then all these specific web elements will implement this in using their own tool. So in Playwright, as you can see, it then converts it finally to the actual action that needs to happen. And yeah, so this is great because with all those teams working together, you could have many merge conflicts that you could cause, because other teams are still working on the tool. They're adding tests, they're updating tests, and in this way we were able to take one application, remove all the Protractor imports from it, still have it run in the pipeline, and during several months able to remove all the Protractor imports and then switch everything over to the tool we chose, and then start implementing and fixing problems while all the other sprints were going on. Unless I've forgotten something, I think I'm going to hand it now back to Johan, who I think has another question for you guys.
Yes, you're absolutely
Yes,
right.
I am absolutely right. Then I'm going to stop presenting.
Yes, you all got some information about the different tools and also a nice demo. So I'm wondering, which tool would you choose at this point? So who would go for Webdriver IO? Cypress. Yeah, there are a few. Playwright. Yeah, there are more for Playwright. And then Test Cafe. This one. Yeah, we chose Playwright as it gave us the most functionality, and also it fits best in our architecture. Cypress, for example, didn't, so that wasn't an option. And we took Webdriver IO as a backup, as it's also a Selenium implementation, just like Protractor. But yeah, we didn't need the backup. It's everything worked fine with Playwright. And as Vincent already said, we actually worked on it while the normal development continued. During 3 sprints, we wrote the implementation for Playwright. And then, before there was some work for refactoring the test set. But we were able to keep our test cases, but now we're just using another tool. So we could just continue working and not rebuilding the whole test set from the ground up. I think that was one of the big gains of this approach. And of course, there were some challenges as well. It was not all easy, but fortunately, we didn't do it alone. We had a lot of pair programming sessions and discussions, and also help from developers. But there were some challenges with Playwright and Protractor running in the same repository due to clashing dependencies. But once we updated to the right version, everything worked. And also the test runners are not the same. Playwright uses Cucumber and Protractor as well, but there's a Protractor Cucumber library. So we had to change some things in the setup. And there were also some fundamental differences. For example, with Selenium, you can resize a browser runtime, but Playwright starts a new instance. But that was not insurmountable. We fixed that as well. So if Playwright stops in a few years, or Google comes up with a new tool with a nice mouse from Test Cafe and a great debugger from Cypress and all the functionality from Playwright, we will be able to switch fairly easily to the new top tool. Do you have any questions? Tim?
Yeah, I do have a question. Testing is a bit new to me, but in general. But I noticed you write down the tests, for instance, in Selenium in several steps, and it takes quite some time for the test to be fully to fully run. My experience so far is that it might take quite a while to get all the steps right, and the selecting of, for instance, the cookie accept click to get those steps right. And it might take a few iterations before you finally arrive to the test you want to perform. Now, I wonder, is there some kind of hot reloading mechanism that will allow you to get to this test, like the correct test quicker, or is it really running a test case over and over again if you encounter an error during your test?
It feels like a on how to develop tests question. I wasn't sure. Like,
yeah,
you mean
maybe,
like how to get the tests actually working and how to?
Especially like the tools you showed, it took some time to perform a test. But
yeah,
if
that's because of my laptop. Like normally that would be much faster. I can guarantee you that.
Yeah, okay, but then in any case, if you encounter an error during a test, is there a way, like a kind of hot reloading mechanism that runs a test again if you do some changes in the definition?
I used to work with one of those tools in Ruby, where if you enter, it would continuously in the background execute the test. Yes, those things are there. We don't use those. I don't know. Do you use a tool like that, Johan?
No, I usually use the debugger. I just
So you just rerun a test in case it
rerun it and then stop it, and then I can see what's happening. Yeah. Usually
Okay.
But I think we didn't do investigation for the 4 tools about this hot reloading thing. That's actually interesting. It would be interesting to see if they have support for this. I assume they all have support for this, but
I know React testing library only, I believe. I'm not sure when, but occasionally it hot reloads if you do a change.
All the front-end frameworks do that. If you have a change in the tile, it will automatically reload the front-end page.
That might be the main difference: a front-end testing library and a more functional test.
No, I mean like the actual code reloads. You mean like when you change the front-end application code, then the application reloads in your browser.
But also the tests.
It will also run the tests.
It also runs a test. Yeah.
It could be in React. I don't know if Angular has a feature like that, but could be. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for your answer.
No problem.
Ronald.
Yes. Do you run these tests in your build pipeline, or do they run separately?
Yeah, we run them in the build pipeline. Yeah.
Okay, good. We do as well. We run about 4,000 of those. Do you experience flakiness? And if yes, how do you divert that?
Yes, we
Because
do.
we
do
sometimes
experience flakiness, definitely. Yeah, I think there's no test that doesn't have it. But we experience it less with Playwright now.
Okay,
so that's a good thing. But still, we tag them with a flaky tag, and then there's a separate pipeline that runs them every day, so we can keep track of those. And sometimes, very often, it also indicates that there's something going on with the application, that something is still loading, and there's a timing issue there. So sometimes we will make a change in the front end. Sometimes we actually just turn off a test if it's not vital enough, not important enough to test, and it keeps slowing you down, the build pipeline. So it really depends.
We do make a Jira issue then, and it's like a high priority issue to fix it.
Is the tagging done automatically, or do you do it by hand? You see, test number 15 is flaky now. Let's tag it, and you stop running it for then. Because I'm looking for ways to speed up our build process, and I hope you have an answer.
There's also in Azure DevOps, you get a nice overview of the step that fails most often, and that also gives a quite good indication of which step is flaky. And then every week I filter the master builds and see which master builds are actually failing, because they shouldn't be failing as they passed on the branch. Exactly. So then you also get a good view of feeling of which tests are flaky, and the same tests tend to come back, and the same steps tend to go back. Yeah, we definitely know which part of the application are more flaky than others. Yeah.
Navigation, error handling.
Yeah,
it's always in those parts. And,
Okay, thanks.
He says. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Anyone else? Yes.
Hi. Great presentation. I'm wondering, is it realistic that you'd use multiple tools for integration testing at the same time? Basically, the setup that you showed. Is it likely that you're going to, well, not production, but that you're actually going to implement it in large mono repos?
It's likely because we did it. We had Protractor tests and Playwright tests simultaneously together until everything was migrated. again, I hope I made this clear during the demo. It wasn't the goal of making this interface with all the 4 tools. That was just a showcase. It's just to show that how you migrate from one tool to the other. So it's a temporary situation.
That makes sense, but you could of course opt to keep it in there and say, in region X, I'm always going to use Playwright, and in region Y, I'm always going to choose Cypress because reasons.
We didn't do that. Maybe Johan, I think we discussed this, and I think we said like, yeah, why would we have this? I don't think we could find a use case, or maybe you know something more.
Well, I can imagine that the difference between the tools is that some are able to are steered from outside the browser and others from within. So the tabbing thing and maybe some network stuff is not available in one, but is available in the other. But because of speed reasons, you want to use the one that doesn't have that ability more, for example. But I can also imagine that it's harder to keep up with 2 frameworks than just one.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, we now have just one tool, right? So with a period of time that we had both tools, and so that we were switching application for application, but now we're not using Protractor anymore. Yeah, and another great benefit I think from this implementation is, for example, for cross-browser testing. There are also some differences with for WebKit, for example, also with Playwright, and you all do that in the implementation. So you don't have to do that throughout your whole test set. You can just support cross-browser testing in one place.
And that's why actually also we chose Playwright, because it's the one tool that did everything we wanted. I have to say your idea is very interesting. Maybe if you use a tool where you don't have cross-browser support, you could use another tool for that. Yeah, it is an interesting idea. We decided not to do that because of what Johan just said, but it is interesting, yeah. And possible, it is possible. I'm not sure it's feasible.
Thanks.
And, thank you very much, Johan and Vincent. Thanks for your presentation. I think we will indeed in the future question everything. That's of course always handy advice. Thanks for showing 4 different tools and explaining why you chose Playwright. And for the others that are on in our office, there are a couple of beers. And if other people still want to hang in this presentation room, of course we can talk and chat with each other for some more time. But for in the end and for all the other, thanks and see you next time.